In today's video, we're working on a Jeep Wrangler. We're swapping out the oil filter housing. I'm going to take you step by step through that process. So a couple things you're going to need to do this job is you're going to need a manifold gasket set here. And then I also picked up a pack of gloves here because I'm a little girly and I don't like my hands dirty. We'll start by popping the hood, taking the top engine cover off. All right, I'm going to get started by removing the air snorkel here first. Loosen up the hose clamp here at the throttle body. Threads here. I'm gonna leave this portion of it attached and just pop the lid off. So I'm gonna pop the clips for the air filter. There's one down here. Pop those, and then right here is gonna be two 10mm bolts, and then these hoses are clipped in there. Pop that out. Pop this out, and then I'm gonna get the whole assembly out here. Well, I guess my hose clamp was loose there. Interesting. There's a air temp sensor right here you need to unplug. Just squeeze the tab, pull it off. And then also on the air box here is a vent hose here. You're gonna take that off. And the reason why I'm gonna take it all off is so I can also inspect to see if I need to change any other things such as the air filter, which it is a little dusty. All right, the next step I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unbolt the throttle body. I'm gonna leave it plugged in and I'm just gonna let it rest down here. So got a little 8mm socket here. Just 4 screws that hold this on. So any tools that I'm using in this video, there will be links for it down in the description of the video. That way if you need to pick any of those up, you can find those. So like I said, I'm gonna leave it plugged in and just set it aside here. Okay, next I'm gonna pop these two hoses here off the intake here, or the upper plenum. So this one just pulled off like that. This one's a little tougher, requires a pair of pliers. And I'm just gonna give it a little twist like that. Then I can pop it off. Just leave them right there, they're good to go. Just pop these things out of the little clips holders. Now this wire loom is held on right here. It's got these Christmas tree style clips. I just use my pliers with the nose closed like this, put it right on top, little pop, down, and it's out. Now we can unplug the map sensor here and just push it off to the side. Now also there's going to be for your brake booster on this side here. It's going to be a hose, same thing. Give it a little twist with the pliers. And then pull the hose off and just kind of tuck it over here on the opposite side of the AC hose here. So on the driver's side of the intake manifold, you got your oil cap here. If you look, there's a bracket right here. There's supposed to be a nut here and a nut here that look like this. So you're going to remove those two nuts there, and then also on the front here, there's supposed to be two right here. You're going to remove those. So as you can see, I'm missing a bunch of them, and then the ones that are there, they're already loose. So I don't know if somebody was working on this and left it loose, or because we off-road this vehicle, the vibration caused them to loosen up, but they're missing, so I'm gonna have to scrounge those up. So go ahead and remove those 4 fasteners. Okay, now I'm gonna jump back over here, and this foam pad needs to be removed. I'm just gonna use some needle nose pliers and slide underneath here, and just pry these little Christmas tree tabs up here. Kind of a pain in the butt, try not to rip the foam pad. Okay, got that one. Get this one out. All right, got those out. Put that right there. See if I can work this foam pad out without ripping it. We want to reuse it. Okay. A quick little tip to make life easier when you're doing a job like that is get one of these little foam pads. To put down here, because I like to climb up in here. You'll see me do it a lot. So this Jeep is lifted, so this makes life easier just to have a little foam pad here. You can jump up here and you can work on it, especially if you have a lifted vehicle. Just makes life a lot easier. I'll leave the link for it down in the description. Okay, so now we're going to remove the 7 fasteners. There's going to be 4, or I believe 4 down the side here. So 1, 2, 3, and then there's 1 right there. Just double check right here. So right there, and then 1, 2, 3, all 8 millimeters. And then I'll get you a close up to where these bolts are at, just the same. So I wanted to show you real quick the fasteners that I just took out. So we start here in the front. We got the bolt here, follow it down the line here, 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 back there in the corner. And then we got the bolt here, here, here. Now we need this, where this main wiring harness is plugged in here, we need to unbolt it right here, here, and then we need to come over here where the AC line's here and here. And then we're gonna kind of just lift this up and push it off to the side. And then that should give us enough clearance to get the manifold out. So we're gonna try to come up, over to the left, and then clear these fasteners here. So it's gonna go kind of up, over, and then arc it out. So I removed the bolts here and then here, but it didn't quite lift up high enough. So a little further back right here on this bracket, if you go down below right here, there's a fastener there and a fastener there. Now, because I have no fenders and a lift, I can probably go through the fender well and see that. I'll show you that, what I'm talking about. If not, you just use an extension, like a 10 millimeter extension. There's the bolt there and right there. And because I'm fenderless and I got a 4.5 inch lift, I can get right in there and I can show you those fasteners I was talking about. So there they are right there. So there, there, and there. Okay, now that I got this bracket unbolted, and now I can push it to the passenger side here and lift it up here. I'm gonna attempt to lift the intake up and then slide it over this way and then unhook it from the bolts over here on the side. So I was able to pull it sideways like that, and I got the front ones clear. Now if I can see if I can get the back ones clear. Just gotta lift it up a little bit, and then one of the things is, if you look at the bolts, they'll fall back down and they'll snag. So what might help is get the bolts lifted up. Alright, I'm almost there. Millimeter. 2 away. There we go. The higher I can lift it up. There it goes. Now it came out. So I cleared the bolts on the sides here. And now it should come right out. Okay, now that I got the intake off, we can take the foam pad off here. Just lift up on it. So now we're going to start working on getting the lower intake out. So one of the things that's going through this oil cooler housing here is coolant. So if you just unbolted it and popped it up right here, all your coolant would drain, you know, in this little valley here. And there's also potential of the oil and the coolant mixing. So there's a couple things we need to get out of the way. So we're going to accomplish draining the block and getting these coolant pipes here out of the way. By right below here, the water pump, we're going to disconnect the hose here, and we're going to lift these pipes up. That's going to drain the engine block. So you want to need something below to catch the coolant. And at the same time, we're going to get these pipes out of the way. So here's a closer look at what we're doing. So one of the things we need to do is get this pipe bracket out of the way so we can get the everything up and get to the injectors and unplug them and stuff. So here is the coolant pipe right here running down. We're going to unplug it here, and we're also going to unplug it here. That way I can just lift these up, get these out of the way, and it'll make it easy to get this bracket out. And we're also going to pop the wiring connector here out. We're not going to unplug it. We're just going to pop it out of the bracket, and then we can get that bracket out of the way. Then we can get back here and we can unplug our fuel injectors, especially the ones under here. And then we can unbolt the lower intake here, and we're going to leave as much of it hooked up as we can. There's going to be a few wires or a few things hooked up to it. We're just going to flip it over here out of our way. So we'll get started by, I got a bucket under here to catch the coolant. I'm going to take the hose clamp off here, slide the hose off, and let that drain. So with a pair of pliers like this, I just squeeze the clamp with that, slid it back. Now we're going to break it free and get it draining. So I got the hose clamp off here and the hose off, and now we can lift the aluminum pipes up, and now we just pop this off here and we can get our bracket out. So pop the wiring harness off. Now I'll just work the bracket out, and if you're doing this, it makes this easier to do the oh, I got one more hooked here, so I'll pop that out and then I'll get the bracket out. Okay, now we need to unplug the injector. So with this bracket out of the way, I can rotate, or I can flex the hose back, I mean not the hose, the wiring harness back like this, and now I can get in here and I can get to the injectors and unplug them. But before you unplug them, you need to see this little red tab here, right here. So see how I pushed it down? That's in a lock position. To get them unlocked, you got to pull that little tab up. Now the easiest way to do it is with a little hook tool. So I don't have one here at the house, but they have the little tool that has a little hook. You would just reach down there and hook it and kind of pull it up. So I was able to get the little locking tab pulled up. Now with it pulled up, now you should be able to just reach in here with your fingers, squeeze it. So I was able to just squeeze the tab right here and unplug it. So this is a closer look at that locking tab. So this is what it looks like when it's pulled out, and then it allows you to squeeze the little tab here and then unplug it. So when you squeeze it, you can see it flexing right there, and it releases a little catch, and you can unplug your ejector. So for me, it wasn't too bad. I was able to get all 6 of the injectors unplugged, and pretty much I did it all by hand. I really didn't need any special tools or anything, so I was able to just push the tabs, pull up on them, and plug. Now, one of the tips I'm going to give you is, if you're having problems getting this tab to unlock, is to push the connector in towards the injector, then squeeze and then pull, and that usually does the trick to get them out. So now I'm going to unbolt the fasteners holding the lower intake down now that we got the injectors unplugged. So it's going to be on the passenger side here. We got one here, one right here, and then you can move the wiring harness over, and right under the hose here you can flex those out of the way. And you got one there on the back side, or the driver's side. You got one here, and you're just going to work your way forward. One here, and then one right here in the front. And like I said, you can move all this out of your way and get to it. So we're going to unbolt it, and then we're going to lift it up, and hopefully there's nothing else really connected. I know this fuel line here is connected, but it's got enough flex on it that we're just going to lift it up and kind of put it over here off to the side. If we have to, we'll disconnect it, but I don't like to disconnect things unless I absolutely have to. Saw it is free. Let's see if I can get it up and do exactly what I want it to do with it. Flex everything out of the way. Yes. Come on, baby. Come on. You can do it. You can do it. So like I said, we're going to leave the hose connected and just flip it out of the way, just like that. Okay, so we got the lower intake out of our way, and now we can see our oil filter housing. But before we start tackling that, what we need to do is clean up all this debris here. You see here, so this is very common, and it's very common, and there's a very good chance that some of that debris fell into the ports here, or the cylinder heads, and we need to clean that out before we tackle that, one, so no more debris falls in, and two, we get all that out. So I have a solution for you to get that out. So what I use to get it out is a shop vac like this. So right here is my Milwaukee M18 shop vac. It runs off of battery power, no cords needed, but that's not the real trick here. The real trick is some of the accessories that they have, and I'll show you. So with this accessory kit that works on any vacuum, it doesn't matter what brand it is. You can take these hoses here and adapt it to your shop vac here, like this here. So I got the hose hooked up to the adapter hooked up to the hose here, and now what we can do is we can get up in here with the hose attached to it. We can vacuum all the dirt and debris around, and then we can get down into the ports and vacuum any debris that has fallen down in the ports on all of them and get it really nice and clean. All right, after getting everything vacuumed out, now I'm going to take some shop towels here and a little bit of brake clean, and I'm going to clean the ports out, or the mating surface here, get the oil and dirt and debris off of it. So I'm just going to spray it onto the paper, onto the shop rag here, and just wipe everything down. Take your time. Try not to wipe the dirt and debris into the cylinder, and try to wipe away from the cylinder. It works really well. And then I may go back over it real quick with the vacuum and suck out everything one more time, just to make sure that there's no debris inside the cylinder heads. So as you can see, I got everything cleaned up here, nice and clean. Now, before I take out the oil filter housing down here, I'm going to put a little blue painter's tape over the ports here so nothing else falls in there while we're taking that out. So I got all the ports taped up. Now I'm ready to take out the oil filter housing. All right, now that we got it all taped up and secure, we're ready to work on it. We're going to disconnect the electrical connectors from the oil pressure and the coolant temp coolant sensor here. So you're going to slide the lock tab up, squeeze the tab, and pull it up. It's a little bit of butt, but you know, squeeze the tab right here. Like if you're having problems, you'll push in, squeeze, and then pull. So squeeze, push, and pull, and you should be able to pop it off just like that. Now you can tuck these back here out of the way. Now it has one coolant hose. It's down there, and as you can see, it's underneath the pressure switch, so it comes up right here and hard to get to. So to make it easier for me to get it out, I'm gonna disconnect it here at the pipe here. So I'll squeeze the clamp, pull it off, separate the hose here, and just leave it hooked up down there. Then I'll unbolt the oil filter housing and pull it out, and then I'll swap that out. So like I said, I disconnected it here, left it hooked up down there. Now we're gonna take out the the E8 Torx bolts here. So you're going to need an E8 Torx socket to get that bolt, that one, and then the two back here. So the socket's going to look like this. Like I said, it's called an E8 female Torx socket, or external socket is what they might call it. So you can put that on there and take those out. Now we should be able to just kind of lift it straight up and pull it right on out. So now that we got the oil filter housing off, you can see where it had been leaking a little bit here, where it's puddled up. They got oil back here in the back, pretty common. Also, if you were ever to replace your knock sensor, if you had codes for knock sensors or anything, this is where they are. You can see them here and here. There's 2 of them. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use my shop vac, and I'm going to suck out all the coolant and oil that's here and suck out a little bit out of these ports, and then get this all cleaned up and get it ready for the new oil filter housing to go in. Now I'm going to use a little bit of a brake clean and my little shop towels here and clean the mating surfaces for the oil filter housing. Before I install the new housing, I'm going to swap over the coolant hose here. So I'm just going to take it off, slide the hose clamp back, swap it over, and try to keep it at the exact same angle and everything. So now I got the hose transferred over. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this brake caliper grease. This is a silicone grease, and I'm going to put it on this one port here on the new oil filter housing right here, because this stabs into a hole and I don't want the gasket to roll or pinch. So I lubricated the gasket with this little bit of a silicone based grease here, and that'll help that slide in and won't damage the seal. And now you want to make sure that all the new seals are already, they should come already on the new oil filter housing, but you just want to make sure everything's in place and not falling off. And now we're going to go ahead and put this back in the vehicle now that we got everything cleaned up. So when I took the oil filter housing, the hose was routed underneath the harness here, so it's going to have to go under the harness. You can lift it up and then hook to the pipe here. So you got to make sure it goes underneath like this when you install it. And now you can go ahead and just line everything up and drop it straight into place. So I went ahead and put the filter housing down in there. I got it started on the port down here. And now I'm just going to center everything up, and then I'll push it down. And once it's fully seated, then I'll start the bolts, all the bolts by hand. So like I said, I'll just start everything by hand, all the bolts. Go ahead and plug in the electrical connectors there, and then once it's all started by hand, then I'll tighten them all down. Okay, now that we got everything started, we need to tighten these down. It's recommended that you torque them down. Like I told you before, I don't have my torque wrench here. I need to get this job done, so I'm gonna use my calibrated elbow here that I've been using for 30 years working on cars. So what we're gonna do is tighten these down to roughly 9 foot-pounds. If you have a torque wrench, torque them down to 9 foot-pounds, and you're gonna start in a crisscross pattern. So right here in the middle bolt, and then the next bolt to the right, then over here, and then over here, kind of like a star pattern like you would do on your lug nuts on the wheels. So we're going to tighten these down so you feel it. If you're doing it like me where you don't have a torque wrench, you're going to feel it snug up in roughly about a quarter turn more, and that's about all you need. 9 foot-pounds is not a lot of torque. So as you can see, it doesn't really matter which bolts you go to first and second, just as long as it's in a star pattern, and you should be good to go. Now all my sensors are hooked up, my coolant hose is back on and tapped. So now what we're going to do is turn our focus over to the intake manifold here, clean this up, swap out all the gaskets, flip it on, take off our tape before we do that. If you don't take off your tape and you put your gaskets on and you torqued it down, you would definitely have a crank no start. So I'm gonna leave it on just until I get this all cleaned up. That way if I flip it over or anything, no debris falls down in there. And just before I put this on, I'll take the tape off. All right, so what we're gonna do is just wipe down any debris or dirt on here. And I just used a shop towel with a little bit of brake clean on it and just wiped it all down here. And now I'm gonna pick out the old O-rings here and swap these out. Now, you could have a little bit of oil inside here, and that's kind of normal, but you want to go ahead and clean that out. If you want to, you can disconnect the fuel line and then take it over to your bench or whatever and work on it, but I'm just going to put a little oil, brake clean in here, just like this, and then use a I'll take a shop towel and a screwdriver and kind of put it in the grooves and just clean those out real quick. Get that all nice and clean. Once that's all cleaned and dried out, then I'll take my new gaskets and put them in place, all 6 of them. Okay, so I got all my O-rings in place. Now I'm gonna flip it back over into place, and you have to lift up some of the hoses and stuff like this and get stuff out of your way. But before I do, I want to take off the tape real quick. Make sure you take that off. So some people might be wondering why I didn't take the fuel line off. And the reason why is there's O-rings inside this line here. And sometimes when you disturb them, they leak. So just from my experience in the past of working on these things, I just leave it connected. Just make sure you don't get it all twisted up when you're working on it. And then now we're gonna go ahead and feed this back into position. Be careful not to knock your O-rings off when you're doing this. So take your time, maneuver the hoses and stuff out of your way. And if you notice, I didn't take the O-rings off the top yet. Those are still the old ones. We'll swap that out in just a second. Just get everything pushed back and get this to drop right down into position. All right. And just like the housing below, we're going to start all these bolts by hand. So we'll start all of them by hand, and then once we're done with that, we'll tighten them down, torque them down, and we're going to do them similar to the one below. We're going to torque them down to the same spec at 9 foot-pounds, but we're going to do a crisscross or a star pattern, so back and forth like this until they're all tightened down. So it's recommended that you use a torque wrench, but since I left mine at work, I'm gotta do it by hand here. So like I said, I'm gonna do it in a star pattern, torque it down to its snug, and then about a quarter turn more. As you can see, I'm choking up on the ratchet here. 9 foot-pounds is not a lot of torque, and I'm just gonna do that in a star pattern. Now that I got the manifold torqued down, I'm gonna go ahead and plug in the injectors, push them on, and then push the red lock tab downwards until they're locked in the locking position. Once all 6 of the injectors are plugged in, then you can go ahead and take the old O-rings here off and swap it out for your new O-rings. Alright, so in the making of this video, I made one little mistake. I forgot to put this foam pad that goes underneath the intake manifold. So when I was doing my cleanup, I noticed this sitting kind of tucked away. It kind of got pushed out of the way, and I forgot to put it on. So I wanted to show you this, make sure you put this back on. Now I'll explain to you what this does. So this foam pad is not for noise or anything like that. What this foam pad is doing is preventing the engine heat from heating up the intake manifold. So you want the coldest air you can get to go in the intake manifold, and this helps reduce transfer of heat from the engine to the manifold, so your air is cold going in, producing the most horsepower. So we definitely want to put this back in. So now I got to take this all back apart just to put this foam pad back in there. So don't make that mistake. Our new gaskets on the top of the upper intake or lower intake here. Now we're going to take the upper intake and go ahead and put it back into position. So I got it all wiped down and cleaned up. So we're going to go ahead and put this in position. So we need these studs here to mount in the brackets here. So the way you're going to do it is kind of tilt it down and in like this. So I got it. Tilt it down. You want to make sure all the hoses and stuff are out of the way. Cut it down. And in. On there, you should be able to not be able to wiggle around. Now you can go ahead and start all of the fasteners, so all of them like this. Once you get all the fasteners started, the proper torque spec is 9 foot-pounds, and you'll torque these down in a star pattern, kind of like you do lug nuts on your car, on your wheels. So now we're just going to torque these down or tighten these down to 9 foot-pounds in that star pattern. So like I said, I don't have the torque wrench here at the house. It's at the shop. so I'm doing this all by hand. So 9 foot-pounds is not a lot. You just want to make sure you go in that star pattern, so you'll feel it get snug in about a quarter turn more. All right, so now these are all tightened down. Now you can start putting things back together. So you can go ahead and start plugging in the hoses, vent hoses here. Put them in their little mounting brackets. So they mount here on the side of the intake here. We'll work on the bracket here in a minute. All the electric connectors, button connectors, all that stuff here, you can go ahead and plug these back in. So you plug the brake booster back in, make sure all the little catches and clamps and everything are secure. Map sensor's plugged in, electric connector in. So we'll get the throttle body in just a minute. Now you can go ahead and start the bolts here and here, and go ahead and tighten those down. So this one was missing half of them. When I get back to work on Monday, I'll see if I can scrounge up some bolts for this. And I'll get some bolts for that. So go ahead and tighten that back up. So once you get that bolted up, everything bolted up and plugged back in, we can put the bracket in. After we get the bracket in, we'll work on getting the foam pads and all that stuff put back into place. So this is where you would do the spark plugs on this side. We've already done it prior to doing this video, so I showed you the hard side. Now what I'm doing is putting the bracket back in place. That mounts over the passenger valve cover here, and it mounts onto the lip of the intake manifold. Okay, now that the bracket is secure, everything's bolted down, the wire loom, all that's all reconnected here. Now I'm going to take this foam pad, slip it back over the intake here on the back side, and then put the little push pins back in here and here. So that portion of it will be done. Let's see. Try not to rip this. See how this went. There we go, there we go. That's back in place. Push that down. Push that down. Good to go. Now make sure everything over here is secure. Just double checking everything, which it looks like everything is. So now we're ready to put the throttle body back on here. So I went ahead and put the throttle body on. It's got a new gasket, everything on there. Put that on. Now we can go ahead and put their air filter and okay, so I got the air filter housing on. I got the intake boot on here. We'll make sure that the hose and the wire loom here is pulled up from underneath and over on this side, because it's going to clip in here. Now you can go ahead and put the two 10mm bolts here to hold it down. Tighten those up. Tighten up your clamp. Tighten up your clamp. So now I'm going to run the vehicle until the thermostat opens up. You'll feel this hose get hot. And I'm going to make sure that all my levels are full. The oil, I'm going to start this up real quick, turn it off, and then double check the oil. This has a new filter in it, so the level should drop a little bit. I'll top that off with fresh oil. If you're doing this, you also may want to change the oil at the time. I had just done it, so I'm just going to make sure it's full and go from there. So I got it fired off here. It's running perfect. Once I'm satisfied that the thermostat has opened up, I'll put the top engine cover on. I'm just going to look around, double check for leaks, look underneath the vehicle, make sure nothing's dripping down below. And once I'm satisfied with that, put the cap on and go for a test drive. So I hope this video was helpful in helping you swap out your oil filter housing.